So my name is Kelsey, and I work for On Gamers. You might know that I do a lot of stuff for Chinese League of Legends and following that. But I'm doing something a little bit different today. I'm going to be interviewing Reazony, the coach of Machi Esports, for a new segment that I like to call Away from Keyboard. I'm going to look to hopefully interview more coaches so that they can shed some light kind of on this game. I know analysts and coaches spend a lot of time looking at the game, building up knowledge, but they don't really have a platform to kind of share where they're coming from. And they have a lot of valuable insight that they can shed on the spotlight. So to start a little bit off, you might not know Reazony very well. He coaches a team called Machi Esports, and it has a very, very unique history. If you don't know, Machi Esports is a Taiwanese team that made it into GPL by beating out the Taipei Snipers. And after that, they had an issue where a couple of their players had to be removed for elo boosting, and I'll let him talk a little bit more about that. And they had to play with first their owner, who was a 41-year-old player. They played with him for one game, and then they had to play with their manager. So I'll let him elaborate a little bit more on some of those decisions and some of that history.
So, hello guys, I'm Reazony. So basically what Machi Esports, so the owner himself is a rap singer in Taiwan, and he owns this company called Machi Entertainment in the music industry of Taiwan. He loves video games. He was so moved, like back in the days when Age of Empire was the thing. Back then Korean was really strong as well. They have the Korean dominance as well. So there was this Taiwanese kid who beat the Korean champion. So he was so moved by that. And then when TPA won season 2 championship, he was like, oh yeah. He loves the feeling of beating the big shark, like the dark horse and stuff like that. But when SK Telecom won season 3, he was like, okay, we have to beat that guy. He wants to create a miracle. It was formed in the beginning of season 4. Essentially, they played spring season in LNL, which is the Taiwan secondary league. Because back then, when they just started, everyone just thought, oh, this is just for fun. This is just an entertaining team, because the owner is just he just pays the money for fun, right? I personally thought of that as well, until when the promotion came for spring to summer. They picked me up, so I came here to Machi to help them out. So we got a little bit lucky and we advanced into GPL. Before the summer season of GPL started, we had a roster change, so our mid laner was gone. So we moved Ender to mid lane, and we had a new top laner, actually 2 of them. But then they were caught by elo boosting before they even became professional. So Garena just told us, well, they are banned and you cannot get new players. Originally, we could only play with our owner. So he's only like Silver 2, Silver 3, and he had no time in training. So we were like, this is outrageous. How could we play with this? We'll be merciful, Garena said. We'll be merciful so you could play with your manager, okay, who was like Diamond 3 in Taiwanese server. And he had no time to train as well. Okay, we tried. I did my preparation right there. They tried to train, but because the plans were not, we were not able to execute the plans because of just simply the mechanical stuff. And yeah, the execution wasn't there. The team was so down. The whole summer season was just ruined from that ban, elo boosting ban.
And I watched a lot of your games, and I noticed that there were times when I felt like the games were really close, like against some of the Insidious gaming matches, where you guys could have easily won, but there were just back and forth, and it made me think that, how does having a top laner who is Diamond 4 in like a professional game, how does that impact the mentality of the players around them? Like,
essentially, because our jungler J Ken is a very he's the kind of player who wants to win really, really hard, right? And he felt that he would have a hard time to work with top lane and mid lane. Like if you watch the games before we got that bans, right? We just moved Ender to mid and we had the new top laner. It was so perfectly fine. We even like I didn't care about any other teams except NHQ only, right? Of course, I still did all the research, but essentially SQ was the only contender. But after that happened, I could tell him exactly what enemy top laner is gonna do at this moment, or all the vision control, what enemy is going to do. But yeah, first of all, our top laner couldn't execute things, and then during the communication, if you listen to their communication back then, our jungler would kind of be like, you would say passive aggressive, or just like he just says a lot of uh, unnecessary stuff and kind of drags the morale down, and essentially no one's just they just couldn't believe in themselves anymore.
The men in the War Gods game, like the War Gods are a Philippines team, which they've done pretty poorly. I'll just say that the Philippines team, with like some exceptions, have done pretty poorly in GPO. But they just kind of destroyed your top laner, and then they snowballed the game off that. And then in future games, you lost the next game against them, against the group stage, and I think you won the tiebreaker match against them because it had you, Insidious Gaming, Rebirth, and War Gods were all had to play the tiebreaker match, right? And
Yeah.
then yeah, you ended up, even though you'd beaten Insidious Gaming twice in the regular season, you lost to them, but then you beat War Gods. You had lost to, I think, both times in the group stage. But just watching that game made me think that, like, okay, after that, how do you come back? Like, as a coach, as a team, how do you try to prep and come back from something where you just know that there's going to be this top lane weakness, and you can kind of upgrade to a Diamond 4 player, right? But you still have this idea that players can almost always take advantage of that and repeat that strategy.
So our team morale was down already, right?
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I had this mentality of I was almost giving up as well. But then I think it was important for me to show that at least I myself should still give all I have, right? Like 100%, 120%, give all I have, and at least they can still see, and at least the players would still see my effort, and at least they, like, some of them might not be asked down. So in the last tiebreakers, they were kind of like, our bottom lane was like, okay, we really could have won, we really could win, okay, and they had this mentality of going strong in, but our jungler and mid, it's kind of like just some kind of something inside that they don't want to work with each other anymore. And essentially, if they kind of fix their issues within, like their psychological issues, they could have won that game. But as a coach, well, first of all, before anything, you gotta make sure you're still giving your 120%, and you realize your weakness. Yes, we have our weakness, but it's not like we just isolate him or something. You, like my new jungler right now, he's also kind of like the weak link of our new team, but I still give my 120% to make sure that um, to try my every, like, to try my best to try to pull him up, right? So I think it's important for them to see me trying to do that, and some of the players might try to do that as well. And I think that at least that mentality helped the newer Machi right now.
How is it different from working with the Diamond 4 top laner or the Silver top laner and knowing that they might have less potential, I guess, less ability to grow than the other players? Do you have to differentiate like your levels of criticism if you notice that they can't maybe CS as well, or they can't do certain things as well? Do you have to be harder on those players, or do you have to be lighter? And then how does that like different? And if there is a difference, how does that affect the mentality of the other players? Like, how do they look at that and say, well, if you're not being hard enough on him, he's not going to get better and we're not going to improve? Or if you're not hard enough, if you're too hard on him, like, he can't do that. You're spending all this time, like, analyzing his play. How do you
Well,
work with players like that?
okay, so I have to differentiate. So, because I have to differentiate from my new jungler right now
Mm-hmm.
and my manager and my owner before. Because my manager and my owner, they are like my top level, right? So
Oh, right.
essentially I couldn't say too much, and they have their own stuff they have to do. So I can't really be like that. So we had to just play something that you think you can be safe with, and Gragas at the time was OP, right? Top playing Gragas. So either he plays Mundo or Gragas and become like, because he was confident in Gragas, but yeah, essentially we try to know. Well, I still try to know what he would love to play, what he is confident in, and just we don't try to make him do complex stuff. We don't tell him to do maybe control this wave or something. Just as long as he could survive, right? And then provide him with necessary vision for him to survive. But it didn't work at the time because the team just didn't want to do. So that's different. But with my new team, right? They are now my players now. I have the control, except I'm not there because I do remote coaching. But at least I'm like their leader right now, right? So what I do is, now this sounds maybe a little bit concerning to some others, because some people believe that you have to be uh, like you have to say, oh, I believe in you, right? Stuff like that. But essentially what I tell them every day is your shit. I basically tell them that, and every single one of them, and I make sure I tell them to myself, and I always tell them it's because if you're not the best, you're shit. If you're not the best, you're still a shit. And in order, okay, so there are two kinds of people who are like, when you face your shit, the fact, two kinds of people you're gonna see. So you're gonna see, okay, most people are going to be like, okay, I'm shit, I'm done, that's all. But like what's gonna change? I'm not going to be faker. But the other kind is gonna be like, okay, I'm shit, but I don't want to be shit. So I'm just gonna try my best to win, right? So essentially, I found this. I don't think this will work with everyone, but at least with my new players right now, every one of them are trying to be not shit. They are trying to be better, become better, to be not shit at all. I'm sorry for I should have used other words, but that's what I actually use. Um, yeah, so I actually am harder. I make sure they know they are not as good as they might have thought. I make sure that whenever they think, oh, I made a big play, oh, I made a good play, I make sure that, okay, you're just lucky on that. You have to make sure you work out, because you have your peak level plays and you have your lowest level play, right? So I tell them, it doesn't matter how your highest level is. You try to pull up your lowest level, and that's how they make themselves better, right? So that's why I always tell them, okay, yeah, just try to improve every day, and at least this has worked so far.
Having read your thoughts on sports psychology and how important you think it is for to have a life coach or to have someone who kind of helps the players figure out like how they're going to learn and this thing, your general approach is just to call them shit, like that kind of interests me. So I want to start talking about the sports psychology and talk about, first of all, how has the situation, do you think that because you were in this situation you've become much more interested in sports psychology? Do you think if you were able to play with the players that you had originally on the roster that got benched for elo boosting, who were better than the top laner for sure, do you think that you would be in this situation and you would be as interested and think that, because in your article you said that sports psychology is the most important thing that teams are lacking right now. So do you think you would still have that feeling if your team had been able to play with the roster that you wanted originally?
Even if we had that roster, I think eventually I will reach that point where I am right now about psychology, even though it might be slower, but I'm still gonna be there because of my interest in life in general.
The fact that you make
Okay.
the statement that it is important, every single team should have a sports psychologist. Do you put, for example, your game knowledge, your ability to analyze games? Would you say that almost a sports psychologist is more important than your role, or is it just the fact that now that teams have caught up, a lot of teams have analysts, a lot of teams have coaches, and this is the next step?
But I actually put them on the same level of like the priority. Every single thought, every single movement, every single behavior, your habit, even if it's just you playing the game, even if it's just you trying to move from right to left, all these little things build up. So essentially, I think that if they try to shape these little things, it's gonna be really, really important. Like they build up to your victory.
It's pretty eye-opening to me that you think that okay, now these teams, they have this infrastructure, they have some of these support staffs and these analysts for the game, but you're saying no, that's nowhere near enough. That's not even good close. You need a sports psychologist, someone to talk about their mentality and coach their life, is just as important because it influences everything. Like, you can't communicate to these players if you don't know how their brain works, and that's pretty much how
Mm-hmm.
your think piece works. So you can have all this game knowledge and all this analysis, and you still might not be able to teach it to them. So,
Well, if I could add a little bit to that.
sure.
So I think it's important to share my own failures when I just started to coach Machi. So, because I was listening to some of the insight all the time back then, right? Essentially, I was like, okay, we might try out this COG approach where you have, okay, early game, jungler, mid to late game, it's gonna be mid lane and support calling stuff. I tried to do that, and then I found out, okay, never mind. My jungler doesn't even know how to make calls back then, and he actually was just very careless about teammates positioning. He has really good mechanics, but in terms of how the map works, he's nowhere like that. Okay, he's a really really he's like a carry jungler, stuff like that. So I realized that, okay, team communication has to be customized. That's where I kind of found out, okay, they have to be customized, and I found out that some people are able to do something while others are not. Some people are just more vocal, some people are just more knowledgeable about one specific area. Like my top laner right now, he's more specific about the wave management, how minions work, um, how large the minions should be, how many minions, like melee, caster, how many minions exactly you need in order to fast push, slow push, stuff like that. So I realized, okay, there's different people with different knowledge, and whenever I look at the team, I should look at what they know or what they are gifted with, and then try to work the team around that, rather than just say, oh, you do this, you do this, you do this, without knowing their gift, their talents and stuff like that. So I think that's why I say you have to really know how their brain works. You have to know how their emotions kind of go up and down, fluctuate, stuff like that. All of them are really important to team communication if you actually go into that.
Is there some mental or emotional characteristic that's necessary for a successful professional player? Because you were talking a little bit earlier about how you pretty much tell them that they're shit, and there will be some people who say, "Okay, I don't care, I can't get better," and then there will be some people who acknowledge that they're shit and they'll want to be like not a bad player. So do you think that like being able to identify that mentality is something that maybe talent scouts or people looking to try out players need to have?
In terms of talent scout, it's actually a little bit harder to actually know their mentality. I guess you have, like, I'm not a super expert on this, to be granted. I'm just kind of know a little bit about this kind of stuff, but essentially I could sense the problems, right? I could sense that they think, oh, they kind of become complacent and everything. I can sense that. But in terms of how to shape, that's where I finally got a life coach. I love that. That's where my life coach comes in and try to shape their mentality into making them want to work rather than just keeping themselves on down. And I thought that was important. What was the question again? I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was just wondering if there's like a baseline mentality or emotion that you need to identify to know that these players can improve and to be successful. Like, is this something that you can instill in them, or is this something that they either have and you need to be able to identify it, or you can just realize that they're not going to have successful professional careers?
Well, some of them are. Well, it's kind of like the mix of both. they come in with a set of mentality already because of their life experience, how they. So some people are going to be more emotional than others. Some people are just going to be more naive, so they have more simple-minded stuff. Like those kind of stuff kind of predetermines, but essentially you can kind of shape them. But it's just like how diamonds you have a diamonds, right?
Right.
You have the set of color and stuff like that, but um how high quality of the diamond is already set, but you can kind of shape it into a more beautiful, more you can refine it. That's what I'm saying.
I want to also touch on the fact that your team has a life coach now, you mentioned. Um,
Yes.
how rare is that in Taiwan to find not only teams willing to get like life coaches or sports psychologists, but to be able to find those kinds of people in general? Because I know, for example, it's really hard in China because there are just not people trained in that area or people who think that that area is necessarily a valid field, or if they are, they're really expensive, or if they are, you have to kind of import them. You have to pay for them to come from other countries where that sort of training is more common. Like, how rare is it to find that in Taiwan? Like, how lucky are you essentially?
Oh, we're actually I actually think we're just kind of really, really, really lucky in this sense. So, um, like my top laner, he's really emotional, and he'd be like, "Yeah, I'm a shitter. I will just. What's the point of playing anyways?" He would be like that. But after that life coach came, he kind of I don't know how, but he kind of shaped him into, okay, I'm a shitter. It's okay. I want to work better. So I thought that was really, really important because I knew he had the potential, but he has the desire to do it. But in Taiwan, in general, I don't think any other teams. I'm not sure, but I don't think it's that common actually. Because if you compare Taiwanese teams to Chinese teams, because well, if I recall correctly, many teams in China, even the second tier team or second league teams, they are kind of like be funded by the second generation rich, right? Like really
Yes.
rich kids. But in Taiwan, it's not like that. Basically, it's because the market, because of the population, our market is really small. So only the top teams like HKA, TPA, HQ, those teams have budget. But if you compare their budget to other teams, it's like, yeah, that's normal. That's like a normal budget. But to us, it's already really high, really big. So essentially, it's gonna be costing too much for them to actually get a life coach, and I don't think they even realize how important this is.
That's a good point that a lot of times you might have to, if you're working with like these really emotional young players, you might have to sort of couch your criticisms in almost niceties, like sugarcoat your language and say, you're not maybe the best at last hitting. Maybe you could practice this a little bit, and that kind of sort of cuts down the time that you have to make practice efficient to make him really
Yes.
realize that this is a problem. Whereas if you have the life coach come in, you have this guy say, okay, when he calls you tells you you're a shitter, he's not like saying that you should just give up. He's saying that I don't know what your life coach is, but I'm imagining there's this conversation. He's just saying that this is a problem. He's trying to emphasize that this is a problem you have, so that you can work on it sooner. And then so that kind of give and take, I think, is really important for players to improve their efficiency faster. So
Yes.
that example kind of the way that you personally communicate. It's almost like you need a translator between how you communicate what you have to share and how they receive it. So
Yeah. Some people would actually think that, oh, if you're a good coach, you should be able to know about these stuff already. But I just want to clarify that most coaches would want to, they would try to a certain extent, but there's this special, because human brain is so complex, right? So there's this special area that you really need a life coach, just to clarify for some people.
and you've said in some of your articles, and we've had conversations where you've said that you think that you're actually very good at taking emotional cues from players and that's something that you could potentially do, but it's just that because of how many demands that there are for a coach or for a life coach, you need multiple people who just focus on this one area so that they can get really good at it. So from that perspective, how big should an esports support staff be? Like, how many analysts specializing in different topics? How many coaches do you think should be? Should there be psychologists? Should there be kinesthesiologists to even like help them with their mechanics? Like, what kind of situation do you see being ideal?
So, in terms of size of the support staff, right? I do think that it really depends on how, like, who the people, on the members that you recruit. So if you're a team manager or something, right, you're looking at a lot of different topics. So I could talk about, like, if you really want to go deep into each of these topics, they can be really, really hard. You talk about vision, you talk about team fight, team compositions, map movement, golden experience distribution, even just jungling, jungle pathing, wave management, position coaching, or even just how to position yourself in lane. You got the lane matchup to talk about, your summoner spells, your spell use, how each ability can work with each other. Okay, you have all sorts of stats, right? Assist to kills. I have a lot of different stats in my mind how to work them. Um, or just the communication system, game mentality, or best of series, because best of series they have different mentality than just best of one. And then you got the emotions, team atmosphere, a lot and a lot, work ethic, diet, workout, and go on and go on, and you have so many topics. But essentially, you're facing this many topics. You're like, yeah, no one can be expert on this, on everything. So we gotta work it out. We gotta pick up a few that we think are really important. We gotta prioritize them, and you gotta make sure that you can, like. So for myself, I pick a certain of them. I got vision, team comp, map movement, wave management, communication system. These are the things that I really, really, really am more specialized in, right? And I know other stuff, but I cannot cover them as effectively as I would love to. So you do think about, okay, how many people you're gonna recruit, and you gotta make sure that these people can cover as many topics as they could in a really effective way. So it really depends. If you just happen to have like a few support staff who are just really good at so many things, specializing in them, and can effectively teach your players about them, then you can have a really small size support staff. But if you want, you see what I mean? It really depends on how many topics each of them they can cover.
So yeah, let's say that. How do you decide which topics, like as a manager or as an owner? Obviously, you probably aren't in those roles. How do you go about deciding like what coach to hire? Do you decide right away which topics you want your coach to have and which topics are the most important, or do you just look for someone who you think is very intelligent and then work with that? Like for example, since you had didn't mention really that lane matchups are a strong suit. So what if Machi Esports suddenly decides that, oh, we need a coach who's really good at lane matchups? Is that they want to hire someone new, or do they just want to see if you can teach them lane matchups, even though it's not one of your strongest suits?
Players themselves can kind of cover up the lane matchup. My top laner, he kind of learned the wave management in a deeper level on his own with a little bit of my help. So whenever he starts questioning, he asks me. But there are some topics that players can cover on their own. So you can omit those questions, and you look at, as a manager, you look at so many topics, you see what is lacking, and you try to hire a coach who can. You think that is important, but you think that's lacking, so you hire a coach from that. You see what area you need help with, then you go from there.
For people who don't watch GPL, they might not realize that GPL is essentially splitting into two leagues. The league with the Vietnamese and the Thai and this essentially everyone who isn't Taiwanese or from Hong Kong, and then or the Macau region, and then you have the LMS, which is going to be the LoL Master Series, and you'll have the Taiwanese teams, you'll have the Hong Kong esports, pretty much everyone who's in LNL. except
Yeah.
it'll be slightly more exclusive. And then if you've watched LNL, it always looks more competitive than GPL also, just because of that disparity. So do you think the fact that you can have, and Taiwan has always historically had only 3 spots in GPL. So do you think that because of the way that now more Taiwanese have a chance to get into the big league and compete with each other, and that level of competition can improve, do you think that this will create an incentive for a lot of these Taiwanese to improve their support staff and maybe invest a little bit more in that area? Or
So in terms of the quality of competition, in the summer split, they finally rose up to 4 spots in GPO for Taiwanese teams actually.
okay.
But essentially, it's the same concept that our top teams in Taiwan they go to fight all the rest of the GPL. But the rest of GPL, like regardless of my Machi incident, right? I mean, we could have been better, but essentially our top teams were just fighting weak teams in our own perspective. And the mediocre teams in Taiwan who could actually spice up more competition, they were stuck in LNL to compete with weak teams as well. So you can find a random challenger team and still can compete in GPL and still can kill them. In so that was so it's just kind of like the alliance situation. I don't mean to be offensive or something, but essentially in Europe back in the summer split, they didn't have as much competition as they usually had. So it's like the same in Taiwan. So I think that LMS, you're merging up the mediocre teams with the top teams, and that will essentially just rise up the whole level of the Taiwanese teams. How much I'm not sure, but it's gonna help for sure. But then, okay, so we got the competition, but we also talk about the support staff. There's a lot of things to consider about this because support staff is right now, okay, teams in Taiwan who would have support staff, they already have, who would not, who don't have, and those teams who don't have the budget to, they just can't. Okay, and in terms of top teams, so you're talking about ASQ, TPA, teams like that. First of all, you have to have a really good relationship with the top teams management. Okay, so they kind of look at, oh, who I'm friends with. They look at them first rather than look at who's good first. You have this community Reddit stuff. We have people who read blogs, but they were never picked up because it's about who you're friends with, right? And then essentially that kind of kills a lot of talents actually. But if today I'm out of work, okay, Machi decided to disband something, I would have no job in Taiwan because of my previous articles about game analysis, about TPA, HQ, stuff like that. I know that certain managers actually don't like me. I know for sure that HQ would never pick me up because their manager hates me. Um, so it's like this. It's about the good relationship for them, and I'll probably out of esports or something if I actually lose the job today. So that's the first thing, okay. And the second thing is, so because they think, okay, everyone I know is good at the game. If you're not being picked up by the insiders, you're probably not good already. So if I were to find someone better, I would go to Koreans, right? So it's the same thing in China, right? I would go to Koreans, and then but then if you want to hire Korean coaches, well, Korean coaches, they can learn English by easier. But if you're talking about Chinese, it's not that it's not like their school system. They have to teach you English mandatory, right? So they might have a harder time in understanding Korean. Um, I mean, understanding Chinese. So not only you have to pay really high salary to hire a Korean coach for Taiwanese, you also have to find a translator, and then you have to cover all those expense. And teams just don't have budget. And teams that have budget like TPA, HQ, stuff like that, they just think they have enough people already. So that good relationship then to cost. That's really dragging the whole thing down. And in terms of this, there's also one thing about LMS, how it's working that's really concerning is that, so LMS, including all the Taiwanese teams and such, they have this venue of only like 100 seats or something, and they have games in every single day. So what this means is, because the reason why they have this much budget is because all the sponsors like Logitech or something, they try to display the product, so they sponsor the Garena to actually get this venue, right? But then when they see they only have 100 seats, and then you're gonna have match every day, so you're diluting your audience. So when they see, oh, I only have these few audience, and I only am displaying my products to these few people, I may be discouraged to continue to support esport. And in the long run, they might not just they might just run away from esport and no other challenger teams being picked up by these bigger companies. So that's my concern for now. Actually, I don't know how it will happen though.
Okay. First of all, like, how much responsibility do you think coaches have in terms of their team's play? Because we have had controversies in the past where it's like, okay, this where the coach almost gets a lot of credit when the team does well and also gets a lot of blame when the team does poorly. So how much responsibility do you think you as a coach should have for your team's failings and when they win and lose games?
Well, I actually think that when you tell your players about your mistakes, right, you have to make sure they know that they make mistakes. But sometimes you have, like as a coach yourself, you have to always think about there's always something you can do in order to improve. It's just like when you play a solo queue, you always think about your own mistakes as even though you actually still analyze for them, but you have to think about your own mistakes. What could you have done better? So what I essentially every time, even though I tell them, okay, this is your mistakes, maybe what we could do, we found out this mistake one, we come up with solution one, two, three, try to solve that question, to solve that problem. And essentially, I also think about myself, like when it's on my own time, I think about myself, what could I have done better? Maybe I should implement more stuff. Maybe I should refine what we had before, and constantly always think about that. But as a player, though, um, it's a little bit tricky question because um, players themselves also take a lot of responsibility. I don't think we should separate them. I think they are just working as a team. So players themselves also are important in that they are willing to take the next step, try to learn, try to become better, and actually not only just listen, but actually um, try to know more on their own. So I take this example of, we all in America, in NA, we all played basketball, I think. Okay, basketball should be a common thing, and there's a standard form of how you shoot the balls, right? And the coach can come in and tell you exactly how you shoot, like a little bit left, a little bit right of your elbow. But essentially, it takes down. Sometimes some people can just use 50, 500. Some people might take to 5,000, 5,000. Yeah, 5,000 practice repetitions to actually learn how to use that form. So it's the same with the players. Players need to be willing to actually just practice and practice and practice about that repetition, and then so they have to be responsible for that end because the coaches cannot play for you. So I think they have different responsibility, but I don't know that I think that's kind of, does that answer your question? I think.
Yeah, I think so. So I guess in the way that would you say that in your explanation that the coach is no more or less responsible for the success of the team than any other single member almost?
Yes, because they are supposed to just work in one unit as well. So yes, I think that's the best way to put it.
Say your team, I guess, to expand on that question a little bit, your team might be, and we talked about this a little bit in that I watched a few of your games where I felt like your team had a decent early game, but they had difficulty like transitioning to the mid game objectives or getting to the point where they were trying to out rotate a Ziggs. But you felt that overall your players had a pretty good mid game rotational point, but their early game was weak. Do you think that like that weakness is reflective of a little bit of your weaknesses and understanding? Like, because you mentioned that you're not so good at the lane matchup parts. Do you think that maybe because you aren't very strong at understanding lane matchups, that your players might also have some failings in that area, or?
Well, in terms of weakness, though, I don't think like it's hard. It's actually hard to tell what the coaches can do. Like you can tell to a certain extent. Maybe this coach doesn't know about early game that much, but it doesn't show as much because you don't know about their conversation. You don't know about how this coach teaches this team, this player, like during their downtime or something. Essentially, you can. It's just like the basketball shooting forms analogy, right? Your player, no, your coach can know about how that forms works, but essentially it takes time for that player to actually get into that perfect form. So I think that even if you look at a general game, they may not show they are strong in this particular area, but sometimes it's because it's during the process. But of course, if it's a long time and it doesn't show any improvement, you probably can say that yeah, this coach is not as good in this area. So for myself, for example, my mathematical skills is really weak. So sometimes players can't even really analyze about the math behind builds and stuff because of me. You can say that because they don't improve on that. So I think that should be, yeah, that should answer your question.
I've answered a lot of these, and I just want to pick your brain a little bit on the
Yeah.
subject of the preseason, some of the Riot blogs that have come out. Since you do have a pretty analytical mind and you've been analyzing the game and you've been thinking about these compositions, there were two things when I was reading these blogs that really kind of stood out to me. And the first one was when they were talking about some of the changes to towers and some of the changes to diversifying the towers. And they specifically highlighted that they think that it's difficult in some stages to play against split pushers and also to play against poke compositions. How do you feel on the state of poke compositions and split pushing right now?
To be honest, I actually think right now they are not as like if your team is gonna have a problem with this, with poke compositions and split poke composition, you're gonna be like in at a competitive level. You only think about because your team didn't coordinate better. I actually think they are quite balanced in a way. Actually, I think they are not as strong. Maybe split push a little bit because of assassins kind of rose up a little bit, but they kind of fell down again as well. But you have these. What I do with my players, I have like six compositions, six composition type. I have team fight, siege, pick, split push, skirmishes, and kite. Six comps, and I tell them each team comp has its own purpose, has its own ways to counter all other five team comps. So if your team is struggling, if in general teams are just struggling against these other comps, it's just because your team is not that coordinated at the time. For example, pick comp was so strong back in season 3, sometimes because of the assassins, but also because teams make a lot of mistakes back then, right? So I do think that they are actually balanced. You just have to find a way to coordinate your team to counter these compositions, to play against these compositions. Yeah, I guess another way to put it is just to know your win condition. I don't really use that word, but I think that's the best way to put it.
And so the other thing is, and I don't want to get too into the numbers and the nitty gritty of the preseason, so I made these questions intentionally general, but just focusing on what they've highlighted as an issue or as a problem. And some of the wording to me and why they were explaining their objective diversity and why they were placing some of these changes on Baron and Dragon specifically, and some of the jungle buffs even, is they wanted to make the rewards incomparable from the different objectives. So you'd be able to build a composition that's focused on taking dragon, and it would be just as effect like these 5 stacking dragons. So the way dragon is supposed to work in the preseason is you get these buffs that stack each time you take the dragon. So you have to take 5 dragons to get the really, really big, all-encompassing god buff, right? That works in the late game, and then, or you can build a team around taking towers very quickly. So as an analyst, when you think about this, like the rewards from objectives are incomparable. Does that sound to you like like a logic that even makes sense? Like as an analytical person who's analyzing the game, is there ever going to be a situation where like, I don't know, both of these are just like, I can't compare them. Like, well, I guess my job is over.
No, this is a very flawed logic. It may just because I think they should have. I don't know what they did before, like what the research was. Is it just they felt like it, or is it they actually ask a lot of analysts or something? But in general, if you talk about experience, if you talk about gold, they are all for one thing, just called power. Okay, your fighting power, or they're giving you power, right? That's why you go back when you have enough gold, because you have to buy out your power. So essentially what we would do is we would look at, okay, is dragon going to give us more power, or is towers going to give us more power? So before, dragons is only just about gold and experience, right? So they kind of work a little bit the same. You can gain the same thing from minions. You can gain the same thing from taking down towers. So that actually is diversifying the team compositions. But if they make this buffs thing, we will just take down the numbers. Okay, so these buffs, I don't know about the numbers, but let's say maybe 10 AP, 10 HP or something like that. We'll take down, okay, how much is this? How much power is this? 1 stack, 2 stacks, 3 stacks, and we'll see the importance of that, and compared to the gold and experience you can gain from taking down towers. And then we see, okay, dragon, maybe you can get 5 stacks of dragons, and it might be just better than taking down 3 towers. So we will just build a comp around dragon, and if the numbers actually work out that way, you can only see team fighting comps. And it's worrying in me, because it seems that I didn't read all those changes in depth, but it does seem that they are trying to limit all the team compositions into just one kind, and that's actually, I don't know, that actually discouraged me as an analyst, really.
Yeah, I mean, because the idea, I guess, is that for those who haven't read the notes, is that they are almost removing the gold bonuses from the dragon and just giving like these power stats. So that almost makes it easier, because you have these like set gold values on these power stats that you're giving, and they are going to be scaling. They're going to be percentage power stats, so those will change like depending on game time and like how much items you already have.
Mm-hmm.
But you'll still be able to maybe almost more easily You're saying it might be even easier to mathematically analyze the difference between, because it is just giving you these like raw stats as opposed to gold. That like gold is interchangeable. You can get gold from towers or gold from dragons and buy whatever you want and get stats that way. So
it's always going to be comparable.
Yeah, I wanted to get your thoughts on how your team is going to do going into this LMS, this whole new Brave New World when it comes around.
So LMS right now, from just scrimmages that we looked at, our own team, currently I do think that Yoi Flash Wolves, again, I think I'm just a big fan of theirs, but Yoi Flash Wolves and HQ have the most chance right now. It's because, first of all, TPA, they just, like, BB just retired, okay? And then you have Morning just said that he's gonna go to top lane like 2 days ago during the show match, and then we see how I think Archie was dual queuing in the bottom lane, so I think that's what's gonna turn out. How Chowei goes to mid lane, like he said during the world stage. I think that's pretty much like a lot we all know about that, but it's concerning about their roster because BB was their core. Right? They still had chance in my opinion if they didn't. I don't know. I guess BB kind of lost his faith or something. So TPA is a little bit weaker than they used to be, and then you have the TPS merged with HQ. Okay, and so they have two teams. So HQ, the original, which went to Rhodes this year, and then you have HQ, no, Logitech Sniper. So they have so many talents, like up to 15 or something people. They have so many players they can work around them. I think if you have this many players, you should be able to work out the best things. Like they have the chance because of this, and these are really strong players as well. And then you go to UE Flash Wolves. I just love Maple. I just love Sword Art. I just think they are really strong. And like all other teams would say the same that UE Flash Wolves is actually underrated. It's just because Maple couldn't play last year or this year, so next year they're gonna be really strong. And then it comes back to my team. I'm gonna be honest that our weak link is going to be my jungle. Okay, I'm not afraid to say that, but I do think that we could improve. We could, because the thing I'm not so comfortable in saying is to say that we're gonna be number one, just because I'm not sure how we're gonna turn out. Like some teams, like some people think you have to be so confident in yourself, but I think that's kind of like you're looking at it too far and too unrealistically, and sometimes that actually slows down my coaching. So I do think that we can perform even better. Like our team used to be like we were beaten down by challenger teams, and I was so sad about that. We couldn't even win against challenger teams, but right now we're actually better. Um, I do think we will be one of the top teams in the end by the end of the season 5. But how it's gonna turn out, it's gonna depend. I think.
A lot of stuff can happen, pretty much. You could
Yes.
get more players accused of elo boosting. So
Oh yeah. Oh my god, that was
that's
so.
never again, right?
Oh yeah.
So anyway, thank you very much for doing this interview. It was really great hearing your perspective, a very unique situation, and some of your ideas on coaching. So, anyone who hasn't read his article on thinkpiece.gg
You
yet,
should go for it.
please do so. Any other shout outs or anything you would like to say?
I really want to shout out to Kelsey and really thank you on bringing me up here and getting more people to read my article. I will write more later on maybe, and I really want to do a shout out to my. Should I just call him Sean or
Sully, yeah, Sully.
Solly? I'm sorry. Yeah, shout out to Solly, and he's been trying hard to work out this whole setting. It's been real great, and I just really love everyone. I love esports. Tell me everything. I will share everything. No secrets. No worries. Thank you.
So if you want to follow him, is Machi_Reazony on Twitter, and of course, thank you to Sully, our illustrious producer, and you can find more great esports content on ongamers.com.